I'm just going to take a minute here and try and spent like 10 minutes trying to pronounce this guy's name, but hang on here. So
Masayoshi.
That's okay. I got it. All right.
Masayoshi. Masayoshi Son.
Masayoshi Son. Okay. Masayoshi
Son.
Son.
Not Son. He's actually Son.
What? So Son is what you're saying.
Yes.
Welcome to episode 61. Today we are talking about the likelihood of cuts to Social Security and Medicare if we will run out of diesel fuel, and we have more lightning round questions at the end. Several Republicans have signaled a new willingness to push for Medicare and Social Security spending cuts as part of a future budget negotiations with President Biden. Their idea includes raising the age for collecting Social Security benefits from 67 to 70 and requiring many older Americans to pay higher premiums for their health care coverage. The ideas are being floated as a way to narrow government spending on programs that are set to consume a growing share of the federal budget in the decades ahead. Is there a chance for the Republicans to succeed any of this, or what do you think the chances are that they're going to start making cuts to Social Security and Medicare, raising fees, and raising the age of eligibility?
So right now, I think the chances of this happening in the near future are pretty minimal. I'm going to paraphrase it here, but there's a famous quote, I guess, from Winston Churchill that says, "You can count on Americans to do the right thing when there's no other options left." Nobody is going to touch Social Security until you're only a few years away from the trust fund being depleted. Now, that being said, Social Security is different from Medicare in that by law, Social Security cannot run a deficit. So no matter what, that problem is going to solve itself. If Social Security only takes in, $2 trillion a year, it can only pay out $2 trillion a year. It can never, ever, unless the law changes, run a deficit. Medicare is different, though. That one is going to be the bigger problem. Again, with that one, nobody's going to touch this until they absolutely have to, because the politicians who do touch it are going to essentially commit political suicide the moment they decide to solve this problem. Even if it's good policy, there's a reason you call these programs the third rail of politics. If you touch them, you're dead. So I don't think anytime soon they're going to solve any of these problems. I think Social Security is still looking at early to mid 2030s when that trust fund goes belly up is the estimate. I think probably late 2020s, early 2030s is when this is really going to become an issue.
I agree with Alex. I think it's possible. It could happen, but I think it's mostly unlikely to see in this next term. Theoretically, the GOP could pass it through Congress. Obviously, Biden would probably veto it, but they could hold the debt ceiling hostage until Biden capitulates. But I think it's mostly a political move by saying they're going to do it now. If the GOP really wanted to make cuts so bad in order to preserve the Social Security and Medicare programs, why didn't they do it in the last administration? The GOP controlled both houses or both chambers of Congress and the White House. I feel like that was a more appropriate time to get it done. Medicare and Social Security are obviously going bankrupt. That's a real problem. And the future solvency issues desperately need to be addressed, preferably before the country defaults on its debt, which I think that is a rather bipartisan wish. But neither political party wants the ugly to start under their watch. Like Alex said, it's political suicide whenever this happens. If cuts are made, I think it's going to be more politically tactical and less about actually addressing the national debt problem.
You can get a lot more mileage using rhetoric like the Republicans, if elected, are going to cut your Social Security and Medicare benefits than you would if say, for example, if Social Security had a cancerous leg, it get a lot more mileage by saying if the Republicans are elected to be doctor, they're going to cut your leg off, as opposed to saying they're going to try to save your life. Social Security and Medicare are essentially on their deathbed. In fact, they're going to run out of money sometime between now and 2035, which means that in order to continue to meet the promises that Social Security has already made, they're going to have to do something. The question is, who will that somebody going to be in order to make those changes? They're not going to be able to maintain the benefits for the people who are currently paying in. It's just arithmetically impossible. They're really bad programs. And for anybody who makes more than let me back it up. Everybody who pays Social Security taxes today is guaranteed to get less in benefits when they retire. That's just the reality of things. And I'm shocked and surprised that so many young workers just tacitly accept that they have to have Social Security for themselves in the future, because it's run out of money, and you're going to pay more and more in taxes, but you'll get less and less in benefits later on. If there's one thing to revolt on, I think people should be revolting, young workers anyway, on paying into Social Security.
Yeah, I don't know if anything's going to happen. I'm glad at least we're starting to talk about it, because I mean, you got 5 years before it's an issue, 10 years before it becomes a big issue, and people need to start talking about it now. Everybody, and you're right. I mean, the first people to dive in this are just going to get annihilated, because everybody's mad at the wrong people. You want to be mad at the people who actually set this up, because they didn't have the money for it to pay for it in the first place. So your anger is, there's going to be a lot of misplaced anger, and people who are going to try and do the right thing are just going to get, at least politically, are just going to get obliterated. But hopefully we're starting the discussion now and just framing it in a way that, maybe even they want to start framing the discussion that, we're not the people that do this. I mean, we talked about this, the office was kind of talking about this morning, how politics is a pretty nasty thing. And if you're, whichever party decides to say that, the other party is just going to eat them alive. But, as a whole, though, you would want to start framing the conversation as that this was a mistake made years ago. Now we have to fix it. And then here are the ways that we're going to fix it. It's either going to get really expensive, or it's just going to go away altogether. But either way, it probably needs to be starting hashed out now. And then maybe 10 years down the road, people will have a good idea that, we'll get all the fighting over with, and just kind of have an idea of what we actually need to do to solve the problem. But that's wishful thinking. Who knows what's actually going to happen, though.
Well, I will note on the people who set this up, this was set up 90 years ago. And when you read about what they were thinking at the time, nobody envisioned a world where people lived until they were 90 and didn't even have 2 kids. There were, I think in 1950, 16 people paying in to every 1 person receiving. And now it's down to 2 to 1. It's trending towards 1 to 1. This was never supposed to be something that people were on for 25 years, with, far fewer kids paying in. So we could have fixed this in the 80s when they started sounding the alarm. Could have done it in the 90s, 2000s. Anybody who's had, all control of all 3 branches, or House, Senate, and presidency, could have solved it, but they haven't. In large part because, like I said, it's basically a death sentence for you to do it. But the real issue is nobody had kids and they're living too long, so you have to respond to that. And people may not like it, but you just can't have a 20-year long pension system like this with 1 to 1 paying into receiving.
Yeah,
I hear what you're saying, Alex, but also is that back in the 1930s, when this program came out, the individual American investor didn't have access to the markets like they do today. And it just
Right.
surprises me that with the proliferation of the ability to do so much better outside of the Social Security system, so few people actually do it. I mean, in America, anybody who lives just the average life expectancy, if they took half of what they're paying in Social Security taxes into a Roth IRA, would do significantly better and be able to make a tax-free distribution to their children when they pass away, so they get a jump start into the future. So this whole Social Security disaster that we're facing, this critical disaster we're facing here in the future, is completely unnecessary. But for some reason, most voters just feel like it's just easier to let the government take care of their retirement than for them to do it for themselves.
it's hard to take the benefit away once you've had the taste for it. You know, my wife Kayla, she picks me up from work most days because she works at the Wave, and we have candy in our office. So I like to give a little piece of candy to my daughter Ellie, who's 2, and I was dad of the year. You know, the first few times I started doing that, and then I'm like, wait, maybe I shouldn't be giving her candy every day. So I stopped, and it was just anathema, and I lost popularity. So it was really hard. Like, I had to go through this period of like being a bad dad. So in that situation, you know, old people aren't crying 2-year-olds, you know, in that, but you know, you see what I mean.
I do.
And also, maybe I should ask this as a question more than a statement, but do you think that specialization in like professional specialization is part of the cause of this? Meaning that, you know, it used to be that everybody like grew their own food and they at least had like a, you know, like a goat or a cow or something that produced milk. And then as, you know, people got specialized, where you have like farmers, you know, make food, then you got people working in the factory, and society's gotten more and more specialized, that everybody's very focused. You know, if you're like a mechanical engineer, you're focused on, oh, Joe's got an answer for me here. You're very focused on your one thing, and that's what you plow all your time into, and you don't kind of do what Joe was saying earlier, think about how you could take your Social Security taxes and dump them into to an IRA or something like that, because you spend all your time thinking about your specific profession, which is getting increasingly specialized.
No, I think the problem is was actually predicted by Alexis de Tocqueville back in the 1830s, where he essentially said that Americans, after a while, will use their democracy to become essentially slaves to the system. That they'll come to vote themselves programs and processes so that they can be less responsible for their daily lives and let somebody else be responsible for it. It's a 2-volume set, and both of them are this thick. It's a pretty long slog, but I think de Tocqueville actually called it right when he said that Americans would get used to the point of becoming a timid sheep that basically do whatever their government tells them to their own demise.
Okay. All right, we'll move on to the next question. Speaking of demise, Tucker Carlson recently told viewers on his television show that the U.S. Will be out of diesel fuel by the week of Thanksgiving, as there's only 25 days of reserve fuel available. He went on to warn that this is going to have devastating impacts on the economy. Is there any truth to this, or is this just hyperbole, or what's Tucker trying to do here?
So number one, I seriously doubt there's actually going to be no more diesel fuel left by the first week or the first few days of Thanksgiving week. What it sounds like was that this is the number if zero diesel fuel is produced or imported or anything else going forward starting today. I haven't actually seen anything, and I like to follow subjects like this for fun and for work, but I haven't seen any real concern out of the shipping industry, or delivery industry, that this is a real problem. I would say that this is there's always a potential that he's trying to influence the election. He is a pundit after all, but also it's, stories like this gain traction because if you've ever heard of it, it's called disaster porn. People really, really like, in a perverse way, to fantasize about, the end of the world and worst case scenarios. It's why, movies like 2012 do so well. It's everybody likes to see everything implode catastrophically and overnight. Even if they don't actually want it to happen, it's kind of thrilling in a perverted way. But ultimately, no, I don't think this is actually a real problem. It seems like this is primarily just a talking point. It's related to, fuel shortages in general worldwide, but I don't think there's any real likelihood that the UPS trucks are going to run dry and that's going to be the end of Christmas.
I think it's hyperbole. I don't think, like Alex said, I don't think the U.S. is just going to completely run out of diesel. Like, last drop of diesel, drips on Thanksgiving Day. That just seems very unlikely. Yes, the markets are quite stressed due to refinery issues and especially us cutting off Russian imports. But yeah, the 25-day prediction is pretty much based off of also, like Alex said, if reserves were just if they stopped today, we have 25 days after that, and that's just not happening. And more importantly, I think people generally solve problems instead of just waiting to lay down and die on day 25. We'll do something between now and then if it actually comes to it. With that said, the diesel shortage it's a real problem. Pretty much every good and service is downstream of diesel production in some way. So a diesel shortage would have cascading effects to pretty much everyone. However, I think politicians and the media, and in this case, Tucker Carlson, they're leveraging the problem and making bold statements about the diesel shortage to gain voter favor right before the midterm elections. I really think that's probably it. The media, and especially the consumers of media, love sensationalism. It revs our engines. So talking about a diesel shortage isn't quite as appealing to our pathos as saying, hey, we're going to be screwed in 25 days.
One of my national heroes is Thomas Sowell, the economist and nationally syndicated columnist. And going back to the 1970s and 80s, when we were going through the oil embargo and crisis, and the price of oil was very, very high, he was fond of saying is that we're running out of oil at today's prices, which essentially he was saying is that we're not actually running out of diesel. We're running out of diesel at $5.34 a gallon. There will be diesel available, but it might be $8 a gallon or $12 a gallon or $15 a gallon. The way you get diesel prices down is you create incentives in the marketplace for people to produce more of it to meet the current demand. Unfortunately, based on some global circumstances and some policy circumstances, the incentives are rather rare to incite or encourage the producers to produce more. If you want more oil, if you want more diesel at $5.34 a gallon or less, you got to have some policy changes. You got to encourage people to actually produce it. Otherwise, yes, we're going to run out of lots of oil at $5.34 a gallon.
Yeah, because nobody wants to build a really expensive refinery when you're telling them that the industry is going to go.
That's right.
Yeah, and so this is kind
Bingo.
this is just, echoing a conversation we had recently. But the other thing I'll say is that right now there's 25 days of diesel reserves available, which is only down from what's typically is around 30 to 35 days. So there really isn't a lot. I mean, a lot relative to what, but they only keep, typically around 30 days of diesel fuel in reserves anyways, because you have to store it somewhere and it's expensive. So you can't just store, infinite quantities of reserve diesel fuel because it has to be stored and all kinds of stuff. So it is down from what it was, a year ago, but it's not alarmingly. Well, I mean, this is all relative, but we're not going to run out by Thanksgiving, is what I'm trying to say. The other thing is that markets are pretty good about telling people when there's an actual crisis, and while oil is up and there are shortages, and it is getting more expensive to produce. Nothing in the oil market is shouting that there is going to be completely gone by Thanksgiving, and I really wish people would not make these kind of predictions. Because Thanksgiving is going to come, and the people who remember it are going to think you look silly because you made this kind of stuff. It's like I don't know if anybody knows who John Impey is. John Van Impey. He used to predict the world, predict the end of the world, every Thursday, and eventually it just got to be like a joke because you never got it right, and it's like, it's going to happen this time. It's like, all right, this is the 50th prediction you've made, and you've never been right. So why would we believe you now? And I really wish people would just leave dates off this kind of thing, because that makes you more time. I've never seen one where anybody's gotten it right and you haven't looked silly. So
it'd be nice if our cancel culture actually canceled people who consistently make bad predictions.
Yeah. All right. So we'll move on to the lightning round. For years, SoftBank founder Masayoshi Son has given flamboyant earnings presentations during shareholder meetings. At times, these presentations have included gooses laying golden eggs, unicorns alongside big sweeping arrows pointing up to indicate large amounts of earnings ahead. Do you think this was a good idea for him to do this, and why do you think he's going to stop doing this?
In general, I mean, it's an entertaining enough way to try and get, individual investors excited about investing in what seemed to have been a lot of, high risk speculative investments. It's really hard to get away with that though, when all those things are tanking. So, when he's pushing AI investments or the metaverse or whatever, it's a lot of hype trying to make a sale, and when those things are down 20-30%, rainbows and unicorns and all that stuff on PowerPoint presentations is maybe not as appropriate. So I guess it's fine if your goal is to get younger people excited about investing, but makes sense not to do them right now.
It was a bold move to do it in the first place. During the tech rally, things were great. It was unicorns and rainbows and all these fun memes and fun presentations. But when you have to explain to shareholders a $35 billion loss, suddenly all those fun presentation icons and memes aren't so funny anymore. So you're going to have to stop. It just doesn't work.
My daughter is currently living and working in Japan. As she is a natural extrovert, living in a monolithic society of introverts, and the flamboyance of Masayoshi-san or Son is it's unique in their culture. But he's not a moron. He realizes that it's impolite to whistle at a funeral. And that doing this sort of flamboyant thing when you've lost people billions and billions of dollars is culturally just unacceptable. And I think he's mature enough to realize that the stunts he was pulling, as well received as they were in Japan, would not continue to be well received if he continued to do it at a time when they're having great financial difficulty for shareholders.
He looks like a fun guy. I watched a brief. I've heard of him, but I've never watched the documentary. But I watched a brief little clip of him on YouTube, and he looks like a fun guy to be around. He's energetic. He looks like he's really smart, and he's a big risk taker. And this seems to fit his personality. But you're right. I mean, I think he's tactful. He reads the situation and knows that I better tame it down. But I also do want to draw attention to the fact that this was going on and it was awesome. And I'm sad to see it go, but it's probably in good taste, though. All right. So a farming question is that seed companies are investing millions of dollars in developing a new, hardier variety of corn, but they are several feet shorter than normal, growing to about 6 feet instead of the usual 9 feet. The corn could be used. The corn uses less water, stands up better against strong prairie winds. But the step down in height is unsettling for some farmers who associate taller corn plants with more grain production. Are you pro or anti short corn?
In the little time I spent researching this, it seems like there, unless you really, really hate companies like Bayer, there doesn't seem to be too much of a downside. If farmers are just kind of weirded out, and that's the worst aspect of it, I would say get over it, I guess.
As a consumer of a lot of corn products, I really don't care. As long as it doesn't, as long as it tastes generally the same. If farmers still want to grow tall corn and pay higher prices for water and fertilizer, so be it. They have that option now. I think it's cool that we're doing short corn. I'll also add that corn is a human invention anyway. So by manipulating it further, we're not really doing anything different.
I kind of echo what Drew said, is that it's kind of interesting that this genetically modified plant has got farmers up in arms who have been using genetically modified plants for decades. Why the height issue is being such a disconcerting thing for them? I'm just wondering if I eat too much of that corn, if I'll get shorter.
Yeah, I hope I don't, because maybe I ate too much as a kid, but that's why I'm short. But it doesn't look as good in horror movies when an alien steps out of like knee-high grass instead of like tall rows of corn. You can't get lost in a corn maze, and I don't think it's not going to be as convenient for aliens when they come make their crop circles, because I don't think it's going to bend as well as the long stuff does. So you probably expect to see that stuff go away. But other than that, I have no problem with short corn. It seems like it'd be a better, than not short corn. So
the aliens will just have to adapt. Only the shortest aliens will be able to look sinister in a cornfield.
Yeah, or they'll just go away and leave us a message that said, "Yeah,
there you go.
Here, but we don't like your corn, so we're gone."
Yeah,
We'll probably see genetically modified aliens.
Yeah, they're shorter now. Yeah. All right. Last question, and this is brought a lot of nostalgia to me, but a new trend called the dad sneaker movement has been used to describe the sudden popularity of bulky, bland sneakers such as the New Balance 550s or the Nike Monarchs. These shoes have been selling for almost 3 times their sticker price, and in some cases have reached prices of upwards of $1,000 or more. What do you think of this trend?
It's just one of those things where I guess there's a secondary market for anything, apparently. Unless there are shortages of them, I really just don't get it. I can kind of understand like some of the higher brand or higher tier brands making their take on, like, there are t-shirts from top tier European brands. They're just white t-shirts and they sell for like hundreds of dollars. So from that standpoint, I guess I can get it. It's a status thing. But if it's just regular old mass produced New Balance shoes, I just don't get it.
These the dad shoes selling for $1,000. It's the ripped jeans of the '90s and the spray-on mud for your car living in urban California. They're just fashion trends. They're just status symbols. It's kind of interesting to watch it from that perspective. I think social media certainly accelerates the fashion trends at a rapid pace. You have TikTok, with the dad shoes and stuff like that. And before, where substitute goods or inferior goods are now wildly popular. So it's just really interesting to see the shifts in demand.
I'm fascinated by the irony is that an average shoe is now considered popular, that everybody wants the average. It's just the human psyche is incredibly fascinating.
I'm not at all surprised by this because I had both of these pairs of shoes. I had the Monarchs in high school, and the New Balance 550s got me through college. And my dad wore both of these too. And the thing about these is that they're extremely durable. I've gotten ththese things wet. I think the New Balance 550, they got me through like all 4 years of college, and they're like virtually indestructible. The only reason I don't wear something similar to this now is because my wife usually buys my shoes since I got married instead of me buying my shoes. But I bought like one pair of these. They're extremely inexpensive, and they're durable as about anything you could buy. So I'm not surprised that people are realizing the value of these kind of shoes. Also, I do wish though that I would have taken a white T-shirt and wrote the word Supreme on it and sold it for $100 like 10 years ago, and retired off of that, because that would have been a brilliant. I just didn't see that as being like something that would catch on. So Alex does have a good point there. I don't know if you've ever seen the Supreme T-shirts. It's just a white T-shirt that says Supreme on it, and they're horribly expensive, but people love them and they pay top dollar for them.
I never thought of you as being a fashion trendsetter before, Tom, but now I see you in an entirely different light.
Yeah. I mean, it was practical. I mean, I didn't have any money in college, and these things were like, they're like $50 now, but I think at the time they were probably like 20 to 30. and you could like run them over with a car, a number of times, and they'd still work great. I mean, they were durable shoes. They just didn't look particularly great.
There are millions of urban teenagers. They want to be Tom Shook.
Yeah, exactly.
Instead of doing this, maybe you should just write a column for Vogue.
I just write about dad shoes.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I should. How do you know it? Maybe I don't. Yeah, you know. Yeah.
Have a virtual reality show of your closet.
It's not. Yeah, it's not. It's not a good place. It's just white and blue T-shirts with gray, blue, and tan pants, and that's it. I mean,
Which are wildly popular right now, by the way.
That's right. Yeah. Because Tom Shook wears them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, all right. That's it for episode 61, and that's it. Have a good day.